The question is, this involves the world of the pharmaceutical or medical industry, so the giant industry of health in the United States. The question is, what is the responsibility of these companies and programs to support research or clinical trials in rare disease populations, even if it's not evident that there may be a return for the investment in doing this? It's kind of, I don't know, but I think I'll start with Dan. Dan, you can jump in.
Okay. Well, I'll be honest. I work for a for-profit company. We're losing an awful lot of money right now. We don't have anything in the clinic yet. It's very unlikely that we're going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars developing a drug for a patient population where we're never going to be able to recover any of our costs. Okay, that's just frankly the reality of the situation. However, I think there's, the thing that people need to keep in mind is that, Angelman syndrome is a rare disorder. And, again, this discussion is focused on a wide range of rare disorders, but there's, we're learning a tremendous amount about, in the past few years and in the future, we're learning a tremendous amount about neurodegenerative disorders, neuromuscular disorders, learning and memory, and all these things are very, very interrelated, right? These are pathways that are all interrelated. Coming up with a drug for some other disorder where there might be a very large patient population and a potential financial return on the investment may lead to something that is of relevance and appropriate for use in Angelman syndrome. So, I think in that context, there are, drug companies, large pharma, small pharma, that are exploring these things. And they might not be directly related to rare diseases or in general or Angelman syndrome in particular, but the discoveries associated that they're coming up with may eventually lead to, areas where there might be some potential for benefit to individuals with Angelman syndrome. Another aspect to this is that the patient foundations in the last 10 or 15 years, patient foundations have become a third source of opportunity for discovery. It used to be that there was academic research and industrial research, and now there's this whole the patient foundation area that has had a tremendous impact now in a number of areas: Huntington's disease, cystic fibrosis. A lot of areas. These areas have not been large markets that have been attacked by big pharma, and the patient foundations have had a tremendous impact. And in many cases, it's been partnerships between patient foundations and industry that have had a big impact and are going to have a big impact in the coming years. So, I would say the foundation is, doing a lot of research now. We're laying the groundwork with a lot of the studies that we're doing now that we're supporting, and we need to look for opportunities to partner those findings and work with pharma to utilize some of the resources that are out there in pharma, and help those programs grow and develop. So, I'll leave it at that.
Excellent response. Would anyone else like to comment?
Yeah, I'm just going to follow up briefly on the foundation issue that you mentioned, because I think that's really critical. There's a whole, in the FDA reauthorization legislation that's just passed the House and Senate for the entire pediatric program within the FDA, but it also has user fees and those kinds of things as well. There's a whole focus on rare diseases within that legislation that both creates a mandate within the agency to create an Office of Rare Diseases, which is actually already created within CEDAR, but also to really try to push some of that forward. And there's a very good success story of the activity of foundations, the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, for one, in the review of something that's just been approved. It's a drug called ivacaftor, that is really the first agent that treats the underlying condition within certain types of cystic fibrosis, within a very narrow patient population that has cystic fibrosis. But the information that was given to both FDA and industry by the foundation, I think was critical, and it's exactly that sort of thing that I think if you read about it has spawned some of those kinds of legislative developments. So.
Okay. All right. Well, with this, I think we're going to.
There was a question.
I just wanted to ask if that mandate that Congress has just passed, was it funded?
Create
another office. I mean, they're notorious for
creating unfunded mandates.
So,
Until we see the final bill, it's going through sort of markup between, and reconciliation now between both houses. I'm not sure that we're going to know. Because that, until we sort of see what that finally looks like, I don't know.
I had a quick comment as well. I think there's a real opportunity to incentivize pharma financially by extending patent life for rare disorders, for adding patent life for repurposing for an orphan indication. I'd also say that it's something, you guys can correct me on the facts here, but it's something 98 or 99% of compounds that go to clinical trials fail. Is it something like that? It's an outrageous number.
90%, the published estimates that I've seen is that 90% of drugs that enter phase 1 testing eventually fail to come to market for whatever reason, either because they're not safe or they're not effective. And as you get progressively through the later stages of development, that number obviously goes down because there's some that get whittled out at every phase. But yeah, a large percentage of them fail.
So it's pretty daunting. So I would argue that a lot of the rare disorders, because in general the genetic basis is known, and I think it's easier to figure out the pathophysiology because of that, they might have a better chance of developing therapeutics for. So I think there's an opportunity for particularly large pharmaceutical companies, because there haven't been many breakthroughs, particularly in neurosciences. And if they're able to have a breakthrough for a rare disorder, even if it's not a huge moneymaker for them, it's going to bring them a lot of kind of recognition and kind of political cash, I'd say. So.
Okay, very good point.
And I have to say, I think that's an excellent point, and the connection in the latest research between Angelman syndrome and autism offers a great opportunity, I think, for the pharmaceutical companies to really proceed on therapeutic treatments for both communities, but it's going to be up to organizations like the Angelman Syndrome Foundation and parents to push for that.
Okay, I think Wenhan, final comment.
So, two comments. So one on the point of foundation. I think it's great to sort of see greater support from foundations for clinical trials, but I think one has to remember there are foundations and then there are foundations. So for rare diseases that are common, if that's that's sort of oxymoronic, but you all know what I mean. There are some organizations, foundations that have much larger support, that are much richer. They can support clinical trials. And then there are also foundations that support ultra-rare diseases. And I don't think it is realistic for those foundations to really support clinical trials. Until I got involved in clinical trials, I never realized how expensive it was. I mean, it will cost over $1 million just to do a small, simple clinical trial to try to prove whether a drug works. And I cannot see any small parent support foundation being able to cough up over $1 million for researchers to conduct clinical trials. So I think what foundations really need to do, in addition to providing money if they can, is to actually help lobby support from the FDA, from the NIH for further funding for clinical trials. My last comment that I just really wanted parents who are maybe watching this to actually know is that there has been a lot of consternation about some developmental outcome measures, and I think what parents need to know, certainly from an ethics point of view, is what the outcome measures are, what the measures measure, and what they do not, what the tools do not measure. So when we talk about, when we use developmental outcome measures for measurement of development, and we report things like developmental age or developmental quotient, or in essence IQ. That's not a measure of one's ability to learn. So an example I would give is all of us sat through 7 or 8 hours of lecture today. Our IQ this morning has not changed from our IQ today, this evening. We have not become smarter. Our IQ has not increased or decreased, and yet we have learned, or I hope we have learned. So I think parents need to realize that if we report that their child's IQ is X, or has changed or not changed over time, whatever that may be, that is not a reflection of their ability to learn. So that's, I think that's just knowing what it is.
And a good point to end on. So I would like to give my sincere thanks to each of you for being part of this panel. It's the first time we've tried this at this symposium, and thank you very much.